A special thanks to our first panel of the payments track this morning. A lot of meaningful conversations and wonderful discussion points from the audience as well, so thank you for participating. For our next panel, we are going to be talking about payments in the freight industry. So if the individuals who are involved in the freight panel would come to the stage, this panel will be led by John Kingston. And it's our last panel before our first break of the morning, which will be sponsored by Heartland. So please come to the stage, and we are looking forward to hearing about your use cases.
Thank you very much. First of all, none of you know me, and I don't know you, and that's because I have nothing to do with payments. But my name is John Kingston. I am the editor-at-large at FreightWaves. We are I think we're still considered a startup. We're about 5 to 6 years old. We're right up the road, about 2 hours in Chattanooga, and we began a news and data service that many years ago that covers the trucking and freight business. I came to it after doing more than 30 years covering oil, so I was very new to trucking. I think I still consider myself new to trucking, and I'm really, really, really new to payments. So if I ask a question of our guest today that you all collectively go like that, I hope you'll forgive me. So, but certainly I want to thank the committee, the conference organizers for asking us. We are certainly interested in payments, particularly to truck drivers, which is a very big issue in this industry, and anything that speeds up that process adds to the efficiency of the nation's freight system. So we were very interested when I was asked, and I do appreciate it. Our three guests were scheduled was Atif Siddiqui, the CEO of Branch, Luis Silva, the Vice President of Digital Partnerships at MasterCard, and the third member, Jerry Tolochko, who was in strategy and planning at Uber Freight. Unfortunately, Jerry has caught COVID, so he's not here today. So I'll have to talk a little bit about Uber Freight because I am somewhat familiar with them. So I was going to try to do my own summary of the initiative, the joint venture, I don't know if you call it a joint venture, initiative, whatever, that brought these individuals together. And then I thought, I'm not going to do as good a job as Atif, as Atif. So Atif, do you want to speak about what you did and why you're here, and how the really 4 companies came together? I view it as 4, maybe 5 companies if you add in the bank.
Definitely. Yeah. Everyone. On? Can you hear me? Yep. Atif Siddiqui, founder, CEO of Branch. At Branch, we work with businesses to help accelerate payments to their workers as a way to empower them. And so when you think about where you can make a big impact in workers' lives, we looked at the freight industry and logistic industry, where these workers, oftentimes independent contractors, are waiting 30, 60, 90 days to receive their payments. And as we'll talk about, during this panel, their cash flow is really important because that helps them grow their own business. And so, when we looked at ways that we can help accelerate payments, we partnered up with Uber Freight. Uber Freight, digital freight brokerage, looking to provide a lot of value to drivers and be a brokerage of choice. They knew faster payments was a way to do this. And so, partnering with us and our digital wallet, we were able to pay drivers on the Uber Freight platform 2 hours after proof of delivery. So if you think about time, 30 days, it's about 99% reduction, 2 hours after proof of delivery. But to do that, we worked in part for our digital wallet with MasterCard. So every Uber Freight driver has a commercial debit card that they receive those funds on. I think we'll talk about a little bit of the unique things that we were able to do working with MasterCard around fuel payments, which is a big payment, and making that process very easy. But yeah, along with MasterCard, some other partners that made this happen were Marqeta, which is our issuer processor, and then our partner bank, Evolve Bank and Trust.
All right, so this is really a 5-entity initiative. Let me talk a little bit about Uber Freight, because unfortunately Jerry is not here to speak about it. I did. He was well enough Friday that we spoke and kind of planned out his talk. So Uber Freight is part of Uber, obviously, and in some ways they operate under the same idea in that they use digital solutions to put together capacity with demand for that capacity. Now, the difference, I think, is, of course, is that the whole idea behind Uber and Lyft is that that capacity was sitting mostly in people's driveways. It remains unused 95% of the time, and so therefore, let's monetize it. And with Uber Freight, not too many people have a Class 8 tractor out in front of their house, so they are dealing with independent owner-operators. They have lots of competition. Companies like Convoy, who are digital brokers, they have not dominated the field here, and there's always been some question about whether a digital broker can provide the kind of levels of service that a human broker can do, because not everything goes well when you're hauling a load of something for 2,000 miles across 2/3 of the country. But they are very successful. They received an investment of about $550 million last year from private equity, and this was right after a quarterly earnings call for Uber, in which Uber Freight rarely comes up on the quarterly earnings calls for Uber, but it did just like, a month or two before this investment, when somebody said, does this company really make sense, or does this activity really make sense in the bigger Uber thing? And the CEO of Uber, whose name I can never pronounce correctly, Dara, right? Yeah. Yes, okay. I'll get it first. I'm not going to get his surname, okay? Said, yes, we think it's very important. And, of course, that's what you expect them to say. And then, of course, they get this investment, a month or two later, and that kind of really affirms that they're sticking around. And Wall Street really values Uber Freight at about $3.2 billion. And as a digital brokerage, the potential, the TAM of the number of drivers out there is, 100,000. Now they might only book a load through Uber Freight once every 6 months. They might do nothing but Uber Freight loads. They're probably not nothing but. But so they are. I just want to make, I wanted to say this to drive home the point that this is a significant player that you teamed up with. Do you want to, Luis? Do you want to talk about MasterCard and what its role is?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you for the invitation and having us here. So great panel and great partners has been throughout this journey. So why MasterCard? So we have been partnering with Branch across their history. So Branch started as an early wage access partner, right? So there was an aspect of how do you bring payments forward into all of the transaction history of a journey. So they have great partnerships in the space, and they have been always kind of succeeding in bringing innovation and different ways of thinking to the ecosystem. So then Uber approached and said, well, we're looking at an innovator partner. They were looking at Branch as that partner to really bring this logistic, and they asked us, do you believe these guys will actually be able to develop a new solution or a new infrastructure for us that rather than be focused on our traditional earners, our car drivers, is focused on our freight drivers, right? So having a couple of conversations, the main challenge we saw across the board was how can we leverage an infrastructure on the commercial space that could be similar to what we offer on the consumer space, but then it brings that unique elements of the fuel aspect, right? Because you want to bring fuel rewards, the fuel pumps, right, has all of these fleet security mechanisms that doesn't allow anyone just to go at the pump and fuel a car. So there was a lot of logistical items that needed to be overcome to bring kind of a different perspective. So that's where the partnership came on, how we brought the Uber Freight's team to the table with their backend and their kind of company.
Right, so you were already partnering with Uber Freight on fuel payments. Let's point out that does this initiative have a name, by the way?
I believe they were referring to it as Lightning Pay at Uber Freight.
Okay. Yeah. Is for far more than fuel. It's for drivers getting paid for their services, right? Okay, go ahead.
So it was taking that early wage access or wallet infrastructure for the drivers to own their banking as a service platform within the Branch app, and then linking that with some of those elements of how do you lower the time for payment from 30 days to 2 days? How do you give access to the drivers for elements that they will need through their journey, right? So they need cash to fuel, to lodging, to all of these different aspects as they commute from point A to point B. So that was a little bit of the idea of how can we leverage the brand infrastructure with the MasterCard network and then the Uber freight logistics system to develop a new kind of app or alternative for drivers in the system.
Right, now let's point out, Atif, that most drivers actually don't get paid in 30 days. They factor. The independent owner operators, they factor. And I don't really know what the factoring speed is now. I'm thinking 7 to 10 days.
That's right.
When I hear something like this, I figure the factoring business is kaput. It can't possibly compete with this.
Yep.
At the same time, just literally last week, I received a press release from a group of factoring executives that had broken away from their other companies and were forming this great new factoring company. And there was a press release, which I couldn't find beforehand, of a factoring initiative that got some huge investment of private equity. So there's still a lot of interest in factoring. Is the factoring business a dead man walking in light of something like this?
I think factoring, has its role in the ecosystem, and as the funding and whatnot shows, right? It's still solving an important problem around cash flow. I think some of the ways that we've approached, our role versus factoring, if you will, is one, when we say instant, it is instant, right? It's not a week. And that's important, especially as you mentioned, a lot of drivers that have come into the market over the last 2 years are single owner operators. There are people maybe that were driving for a company and are like, I want to start my own business, own my own truck, and be my own boss.
Yeah, and the numbers back that up. The number of new authorities granted by the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration is significant.
Significant, right? And so for these drivers, they're business owners for the first time. And so, what we've looked at is how do you create this very frictionless experience for those individuals, these single owner operators, so they can get started from day one. And, with our solution, we see ourselves the way to do that versus factoring where, you're submitting a bunch of paperwork in, there's a lot of delays and underwriting decisions that need to be done. And then some of the other things that we've seen where it differentiates us from factoring too is typically when you factor, you're locked into these situations for a year, a long period of time. Where we know what's really important to drivers is flexibility. We see that with flexibility in pay. We see that with flexibility in scheduling, with working with Uber Freight. And so giving the individual that flexibility, I think, is really, really important in any solution as well.
I'm interested with the number of parties that are involved in this. Who does the marketing to these drivers? Is it MasterCard? Is it Branch? Is it Uber Freight? Or is it all of you? Are you all involved?
Yeah.
I mean, MasterCard's the most well-known brand name out there, and your card logo is, I'm sure, on many, fuel cards you already discussed. What are you doing in terms of marketing to this gigantic universe of drivers?
Yeah, I could speak on our behalf. I mean, great, one, you get the credibility of MasterCard, right? Recognizable brand. But what we've done is we really want to live where drivers are already at, right, in terms of marketing. And one, where they're already at is the Uber Freight app, right? They're opening it up every day to check out their loads, their destinations and routes. And so what we've done is embedded our experience into the Uber Freight application. So day one, an Uber Freight driver signs up. They see front and center, hey, do you want to get paid literally 2 hours after every delivery? Here's Lightning Pay. And they can onboard through the Uber Freight experience, very seamless in that regard. And I think, what we're seeing as a trend in fintech in general is this idea of embedded experiences, right? Be where the users are at to increase that adoption and whatnot. So, but.
And on top of that, I think that it's where we provide is more of the understanding on the back end of everything that they're doing. So when we get kind of asked from partners like, where can I find a fleet partner, a fleet operations and things like that? Is Branch a reliable partner? Then that's where we come based on our relationship and we support what we see. And then on the Uber Freight side, they also kind of come out and say to all of these new operators, like, here's a new value proposition, right? So when we speak with you, why to come to our platform? It's not just because we provide the logistic engine. We also, as Atif mentioned, bring the time to pay, right? And this window for the new owner operators is just insane. It's just like, hey, now I don't have to pay for all of these out of my checkbook. I can actually get paid really soon after delivering the good.
Yeah, that's a good point. When Uber Freight is selling carriers to join their platform, they're using this as a way to attract talent as well, right? This idea of the value prop of getting paid faster.
Right, and from talking to Jerry, they have other payment offerings in their system, and now, but I know how you're going to answer this, but I'll ask it anyway. Of the other payment offerings, is this like at the top of their heap? This is the one that they're first going to go to? I mean, let's point out that this was announced, last October, I believe?
Yep.
So it hasn't really had a year to run, but do you find that Uber Freight is really saying, look, this is the one you want?
They are, and I think there's a couple reasons, right? From a business perspective, one of the stats that was really compelling early on, you mentioned we launched it in October, and, within 3 months of the program, one of the things that they saw was that people using the Uber Freight branch product, they were seeing an increase of 30% of loads taken, right? So drivers were more productive, and I think it was this idea of like, hey, I can take one more load because I'll get money today, right after. So that was pretty compelling. And then, in addition, I think just to the faster payments, Uber Freight, as well as, us at Branch, we look at this as a very holistic solution to help out, as Luis mentioned, the worker's journey, helping out with cash flow. And so one of the big selling points too is this idea of fuel rewards, right? Fuel is a huge expense for drivers. They spend anywhere from $300 to $600 a week on fuel, diesel fuel. And, providing them money back into their wallet instantly, they don't have to do anything, is a big draw for them. And so we were able to work again with Uber Freight, bring in their customized rewards. They've already negotiated with their merchants, the 2 largest kind of truck stops in America, Loves and TA, and put them into our app, so it's very frictionless.
I'm going to ask, again, a very naive question, my own lack of information on payments. How's everybody making money off this? I mean, does Uber Freight make money off this, or is this just an offering to make their total service better? And how do you and Marqeta and MasterCard get paid?
Yeah, so it's really easy. We primarily get paid through interchange, right? Interchange is anytime the driver goes out and swipes their card at the merchant, that merchant pays a fee to MasterCard, and we split that with them.
And how about Marqeta, same thing?
It's same thing. They're a part of that cut too.
Is Uber Freight, do they just make a better offering, or is there any flow out of Lightning Pay to them?
Yeah, for them, it's really just a way to attract and retain talent, right? They're looking at this as a way to be a marketplace of choice or a digital broker of choice.
I know, you both have been involved in many arrangements and deals with others. How complicated was this to put together? You've got 4 entities. Yeah. That sounds like a lot to get everybody to agree. What was the timeline of this, and how did you touched on it briefly, but talk a little bit better about how it went from an idea to a reality. Whereas I think there was an old quote about, right now it's only a notion, but I think with a little work I can turn it into a concept, and then maybe an idea. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, as Luis mentioned, right, we've been doing work with MasterCard as well as Marqeta and Evolve just on the W-2 side of employees with, some other programs around early wage access, working with retailers, restaurants. When we looked at logistics, though, this was a new space for us, moving into the realm of paying independent contractors. And I think that's where we leverage the relationship and understanding of MasterCard and what they've done in the space. And so.
Yeah, so we brought out our SMEs, right? So MasterCard has a lot of backing on the fleets and freight side. We have a lot of logistical teams that have been part of this journey. So we brought their expertise to the table, sitting down, understanding what were the requirements, what was the unique value proposition that needed to be developed, and how do you bring all of these elements together. So it was certainly a co-creation process, right? It was just not, let's take an out-of-the-box solution and that's where we're going. They really wanted to build something unique, something that was tailored to their drivers in the way that they wanted to, the driver's experience to be built. And then how do you bring kind of the different elements of the traditional fleet, logistics, early wage access, and then that kind of network of what Uber differentiates themselves from, that is just do your work, get paid, right? So all of those elements needed to be formalized and come into a concert that didn't exist. So I think that was kind of that unique value proposition.
Is there any, are there any limitations? If I'm a driver, do I have to meet certain standards to be able to be a customer of Lightning Pay? Do I have to pull X number of loads a year? Just or all in, as long as I've got a truck in my motor carrier authority, it's all pistons going?
That's right, as long as you're picking up a load on Uber Freight, which is what they want, right? You're able to access Lightning Pay. But you do bring up a good point. One of the things we do see around instant payments and kind of going back to this idea of rewards is, really enhancing the loyalty of your workers and drivers. We recently announced too, we're working with Uber drivers on that side, and they've really tiered out their loyalty system where they're offering special discounts and rewards for higher tier drivers and versus the ones that just joined the network. I
did want to mention something about Uber Freight that I forgot earlier. This may be kind of inside baseball on the freight side, but last year they bought a company called Transplace, which was very much a logistics company, not really a logistics company, kind of a transportation management system that serves shippers. And putting Uber Freight and Transplace together as one was considered really radical and very, very forward-looking. So I just wanted to raise that as a point that, you teamed up with a name that everybody knows because everybody knows Uber, but the reality is you also teamed up with a partner that did something last year that really nobody else has done. So they took a real step ahead of their other digital broker competitors in doing that deal in Transplace. Is the governance under Branch, is it really kind of yours to run every day, or do you have like a team that runs it, maybe with representatives from each of the individual parties?
It is a joint effort. I think at the end of the day, what Branch takes on is the program management, right? We provide the digital application too for the end drivers, the compliance around the banking side, right? Working with our banking partner Evolve. But it is a team effort.
Well, let's talk about, again, we talked about factoring, and people, in fact, are not probably waiting 30 days to get paid,
Sure.
but they've got to pay a fee, right? I mean, it eats into their profits. What kind of resistance do you get out there? Because, anybody in trucking will tell you that truck drivers tend to be a somewhat ornery and stubborn lot.
Yeah.
And so you've got to persuade them to do something different. And, there's the old phrase of if it sounds too good to believe, it probably isn't true. And, you're going to get paid in 2 hours. How do you combat that?
Yeah.
And I was, Luis, same thing, because you're already in their wallets with the fuel card. So how do you work against that?
I think the first things that we point out was just like focusing on a segment of the market that would be most receptive. And so initially we focused on the single owner operators, people just starting, their business for within the last 2 years, and they're looking for business tools and solutions. And so great product market fit there. I think as we continue the evolution of the product, right, looking how we expand now into smaller carriers. So now you're talking about small fleets, anywhere from 5 to 20 trucks, right? And their needs might be a little bit different when it comes to a business bank account. They have other expenses, they have drivers to pay. So looking at, again, adding on to our product suite to make sure that we're filling that, that gap and those needs of those drivers as well.
Did you have to add a significant marketing effort, or maybe you're planning on doing it to penetrate? Again, the total available market is massive.
Yeah, I think, as we look to solving the needs of drivers across different companies too, that's really important. It's just, as you mentioned, trust is a huge factor, especially when you're dealing with somebody's pay. It's a big deal.
Luis, if they're already a fuel card customer, do they have to do anything different, or just it all gets set up by Branch and now their fuel card is suddenly activated for also, the broader digital wallet? Do you have to take other steps, or is it just a smooth transition?
So it's an interesting point. So that if we look at the history, right, normally you will go to a fleet operator and they will give you a car, and then this car will be on the truck, and then there's a lot of fraud and risk we spoke before, right? So anyone can take the car, swipe it, and then you will say, well, this was not swiped for the specific truck, or there's a lot of elements that come into place. All of that was a challenge, and because of this new application, because of the new app that Branch wanted to bring to the market, we wanted to bring something that was unique, right? Something that really take out that traditional experience where you had to have one car for your expenses, one car for the fueling, one car for your rewards, and just say, hey, technology allows to bring all of this together. Can we do it? So that was kind of that journey that we started. And as of today, Branch developed a new kind of feature that's called Fuel Lock. And it just allows you to take your car and just go to the pump, activate it through biometrics, and just fuel it at the pump, which is not something that you see every day with a MasterCard. Normally, you have to go into the store and actually pay at the store for fueling with your card. So we believe that these are some of those innovations in the journey and the user experience that really drive that differentiated value. So you have your banking card, you have your everyday spend, and now you can actually fuel at the pump.
Is this structure scalable into other industries, or is this just set up to deal with trucking because it's trucking and it's unique and it's different and it's not the kind of thing that you have? Or, I was looking over your, Tiff, I was looking over your page yesterday, and you talked about that you have a lot of solutions for 1099 workers. Well, these are 1099 workers. Are you going to be able to take this and say, well, we can also do it in this industry, that industry, et cetera?
Yeah, I mean, I think this idea and pain point is pretty universal. People, improving cash flow for independent contractors, right? And so outside of logistics, you look at construction, same thing. It's 30, 60, 90 days. Subcontractors, contractors have to wait to get their pay. And so, what we've done is, we built a very horizontal solution, right? With the ability to meet some of the nuances in different verticals, right? As Luis mentioned, adding in the fuel lock capability specific to logistics. But what we're thinking is, again, this idea of faster payments, improving cash flow, rewards, building loyalty applies across industry verticals.
Is this, do you have a deal with MasterCard where it's just going to be MasterCard now, or can you bring this out onto other card providers as well after maybe a certain window of exclusivity?
Yeah, I'll let Luis answer that. Right now, I think I'd have to say we're locked into MasterCard, but.
Okay.
So my answer will be hopefully our partnership approach and the way that we co-innovate with them will be enough to continue to partner with us in the long run.
Yeah.
And that's what we do, right? It's not just about bringing some money to the table. It's about really bringing the partnership to SMEs and ensuring that there's consistency at work that could help us kind of build upon the relation.
Yeah, MasterCard's been a great partner and thought leader there to help us solve these unique challenges.
All right, before I open the floor, questions from the floor, I thought I'd ask you, and this is really for me, what have you learned about trucking that you never knew? And you thought, wow, really, they do that? I mean, obviously, I'm sure you went from like me, a fairly small base of knowledge about trucking, maybe some assumptions, and now that you've really been in there with both feet, you think, I cannot believe that trucking actually does that.
Yeah, I think for me, it was just how much of a closed loop it was, right? As a consumer, you think everything's an open loop system, right? You go and use your debit card wherever you want. But with trucking, it's very much a closed loop system, meaning like, again, going back to the fuel question, like you couldn't use a MasterCard debit card at the pump. You would have to type in your US dot number. It goes through a completely different kind of system there. Similarly, before branch too, the alternative is what they call T-checks, right? So they're taking checks to the truck stop, they key in the check, and the driver gets out cash from the till, right? And so things like that really just kind of blew my mind how far behind.
I mean, that one thing that's amazing to me is the amount of paper that's still floating around this industry in bill of ladings and invoices, et cetera. Luis, it sounds like you were already dealing with trucking because you had a fuel card, but same question.
So personally, myself, I was not. The company certainly has been on the fleet side for a long time. For me, this was the first experience into getting into freights and understanding, right? And certainly it was eye-opening. The first thing was like, whoa, why is everything so locked? Why is everything so kind of back? And then it is everything about, well, if you want to look at the accounts payables, accounts receivables, the logistics, everything that goes into it is manual. So it's a really an ecosystem that
needs to be evolved and that needs to be upgraded. And I think that we're seeing all of that with everything that happened over the last couple of years, that there's a big need and a big necessity to kind of go through it and redo the way that freight is being managed today.
Okay, now, questions from the floor. Yes, ma'am.
Does the driver have to pay a fee or accept a discount to get their money immediately versus 30 days later? And if not, what is the incentive for the payer to pay immediately versus waiting 30 days?
All right, so the question is, does the driver have to take a haircut to get paid that quickly?
Yeah, with our system, no. And that was the huge draw. I think we wanted, since we've operated, we don't charge the company, the payor, or the payee in this case. It's primarily interchange driven for a revenue model. The incentive for the payor in this case is, again, they want to be a platform of choice, right? They have reliable data on when the driver needs to get paid. And so for Uber Freight, it's really just they want to be a platform of choice and it helps them attract and retain talent, and they know that.
And I think the other aspect is that the way Uber Freight works is that you're paying up front, right? It's not that you pay back. You select the load, you say where it is, you tell them where they needed to pick it up and deliver it, and then you pay up front. So
Sure.
That journey in itself also helps the cash flow management.
Okay. Other questions? Yes, sir.
The biggest issue in the industry is the availability of drivers. We don't have drivers excuse me, but there's not many industries that can get paid 2 hours.
Right.
I mean, retailers now say same day pay, right, for employee pay. But at the end of the day, 2 hours is outstanding, and it doesn't cost you. That's a huge benefit. And we need to solve the issue of low availability of drivers.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're right about the tight availability of drivers. At Freightways, we don't like to talk about the driver shortage. We don't consider it a shortage, but certainly it's a squeeze. And anybody who's out there who's looking for capacity, the economic term defined as a driver or a truck, is going to, if they're smart, they know that they will get that capacity if they do things to make that capacity's life easier, and which this clearly is aimed at.
Can you do something to help them, the companies that recruit new drivers?
Yeah, so one of the things that we've done and we've seen really great stats on, one of our investors is Indeed job placement, platform. And so they've run some tests, right, where they've advertised, get paid instantly, and the willingness to apply, they definitely see an increase in the willingness to apply, double-digit increases. So people are actually applying to these jobs where they know they can get kind of what you mentioned, right, where they can get paid faster. And so, as we work with more platforms like Uber Freights, the Uber Freights of the world, they're actively using this in their recruitment efforts and marketing it. So it's a big part of their strategy.
Okay, we have time for one more. Yes, sir. We'll try to get two more in. Okay, yes, sir.
For Uber Freight, how is the dispute handled for goods damaged in transit?
That probably wouldn't involve a branch. Just knowing, it would be between the original shipper and the broker and the receiver, but I don't really think the payment process would get into that. That goes on all the time, obviously, but.
Yeah, on the traditional payments rail, if you pay with a MasterCard on Uber Freight, then we will use our traditional flows, but we will need Jerry to answer that question more properly on the delivery good.
Yeah, one more. We have one more. Yes, sir.
How do you control the spending? Do you actually depend upon the market, or do you have your own control mechanism, like driver can pay the card, use the fuel card to pay the fuel, right? Or they can use for the personal use case, right? How do you handle the situation?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I mentioned early on the first product we launched was targeted mainly towards single owner operators. So in their case, it's their money, right? Use it as they will, it's their pay. When we're looking at sort of smaller carriers where they want to issue, say, cards to their drivers, then we're looking at adding controls in, right? Either controls based on various merchant codes, right? You can only spend at XYZ gas station or on daily spend.
I want to thank our panelists.
We got one more in the back.
Okay.
You have a geographical location you track, and then that's how you can locate the driver where he's actually using the car.
Yeah, it's more on like merchant codes and daily spend right now. Yeah.
Then again, I want to thank our panelists,
John, we
Atif
got
and
one
Luis.
question on the
We
back.
have, we have one more? All
Yeah,
right.
we can do one more.
I was with this gentleman on the liability insurance and freight forwarding. Wouldn't that be a product that could be inside the payments?
100%, yeah. So the goal and sort of the vision for Branch, at least I can speak to this, is that, we know payments are one aspect of kind of helping drivers holistically, but they're a very high engagement, very sticky aspect of their lives. And so from there, you can build a suite of financial products, be it insurance, be it credit, and kind of expand throughout their life cycle.
So we just announced, for example, with the new Uber Pro card that is the earners, the traditional driver card that Uber is launching with Branch, what it's called portable benefits, which is you carry the benefit of insurance and you can pay now for your personal insurance and all that through this application. So it's extending that livelihood of you're a single owner operator, you need taxes, you need insurance, you need all of these benefits. So we're bringing all that holistic story to you.
Well, I hope that Atif and Luis will hang around and ask any other questions. I have to head off to Chattanooga, unfortunately. But again, thank you very much for having us, and thank you for the great time.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, everyone.
All right, thank you everyone for your attention and your great questions this morning. We are now going to go into a 30-minute break. Please be back at 10:35 for the second half of the morning payments track sessions. Thank you.